All right, two more examples with using the quadratic formula. Let me just go ahead and write it out. So it's on the screen. Get used to this formula. Practice writing it out. Don't just look it up every time you do a problem, but try and get it to stick in your memory. It will be very useful, obviously, in this class and the rest of this chapter, but lots of future classes. Quadratic formula, very well known, very widely used. There it is again. Okay, let's try it on this example, part B. Y squared plus 6 equals 4y. Now, one thing to remember also, and I probably should have written this as well, the quadratic formula has to come from this statement. Ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. It has to equal 0 for that to follow, which is not what we have in this problem. So our first step is to make it look like that. So what should we do? Well, okay, hopefully you know, we're going to subtract the 4y over onto the left. Yeah, set it equal to 0. And you notice I even put the minus 4y between, so I've got that same feel, right? The y squared, then the y, then the constant equals 0. Y squared minus 4y plus 6 equals 0. And now that fits this shape. Okay, like in the last example, before we jump into the formula, I recommend writing out the values of A, B, and C. So a couple things a little different here. For one thing, what's the value of A? What number appears in front of y squared? And it's got to be a 1, right? It's like 1y squared. Okay. How about B? What's the value of B? And we need to include the negative, negative 4. And then the C is positive 6. So if I write those out, A is 1, B is negative 4, C is positive 6. And now I plug them all in. And I'll try not to give away too much of the problem at once. There it is. So fitting our formula. Negative b. Okay, so if b is negative 4, then I should take negative negative 4. And that's easy to mess up. People get thrown off by too many negatives sometimes. But b is negative 4. I need negative negative 4. Plus or minus negative 4 squared. And here you notice I need to put parentheses around the negative 4 because it's the entire thing. It's being squared. All right. Minus 4 times a, which is 1, times c, which is 6, and it's divided by 2 times a. And again, my a is 1. Okay. So this step here and all the little nuances, the negative of the negative, here it's got to be in parentheses. And then just getting the formula right in the first place, that's setting you off in the right direction. This is the most difficult step. So take your time with it. Make sure this is set up correctly, because if a negative sign is off here, well, obviously nothing else is going to be true from then on. Okay, so let's keep going. Negative, negative, those are going to cancel. A negative number squared will become a positive. So what might happen, actually, probably what I did next is I just went ahead and computed this whole thing. So if you do all of that, and then I think at the same time, let's do the negative negative and the 2 times 1. What is this entire thing? in that square root going to be? -8. Oh, interesting. Okay, so here's my next line. +4 there, plus or minus square root of -8 over 2. Okay. Let's see, square root of -8. What I want to do next is try and reduce my square root as much as possible. So I believe that's what I have over here on the side. Good thing we just spent a whole chapter reducing square roots. And these things, right, they come back around, obviously. Square root -8. Well, 8 is 4 times 2, and I've got the -1 as well. 4 times 2 times -1. Square root of 4 is 2. Square root of -1 is I, and then that 2 gets left behind. So there's my reduced square root, my reduced radical. So I'm going to put that next. Okay. So I've written 2 lines here, but let's ignore that one. This guy just turned into that. That's all that happened. Okay. Square root -8 became 2i square root 2. Then you're like, okay, great, we're in a good position. Then you notice everything is a multiple of 2, 4, 2, and 2. So I factored a 2 out of the numerator. Which left behind 2 plus or minus I square root 2, right, if this was to distribute back. Why do I want to do that? So that I can cancel out those 2's. And you might be happy with this as your final answer. Y equals 2 plus or minus I square root 2. Now, you might think, hey, shouldn't we go further? Shouldn't we write them as 2 separate statements? And yeah, you certainly could. 2 plus I square root 2, 2 minus I square root 2. But since you cannot reduce either of them, oftentimes people just prefer this style where they put the plus or minus in between and that's it. So you could answer this way, or you could answer with both of these. Either way works. So, what was tricky there? Just for one, identifying the A, the B, and the C correctly, and then executing that simplification, and it involved an I. So that was a little bit tricky as well. Okay, I've got one more example for us. Something a little bit different, of course. Now, at first, this looks like a beast, but we're going to be able to clean it up really well. 14 times the quantity x minus 4 minus the quantity x plus 2 equals x plus 2 times x minus 4. Okay, wow. So there's a lot going on, but the idea is we're going to multiply all of this out. We're going to clean it up. We're going to move all the terms onto one side. We're going to make it look like ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. Once we have that, then we can apply our formula. Okay, so let's go for it. Well, what can we do over here? Let's distribute. Let's distribute our minus sign. Let's FOIL right here. And I've done all that. The 14 multiplies. The negative sign distributes. And there's a FOIL happening out over there. I'll give you a moment to look at that yourself. Multiply out everything. Okay, then we're going to get everything on the same side. Now, it turns out we could move, we've got a choice. We could move all of these terms to the left, making the 0 here. Or we could move all these terms to the right, making the 0 here. You know what? I'm one step ahead of myself. That is a choice we have. We could also just clean this up. We've got some like terms. My apologies there. Let's combine like terms just on the sides. We've got an x, a number, x's, x's. Okay, so we haven't moved anything around yet. Just cleaning up the left, cleaning up the right, get those as simple as possible. Okay. 13x minus 58 equals x squared minus 2x minus 8. We've simplified each side as far as we can. Now, we've got the choice. We could move these terms to the left, or we could move these terms to the right. Either way is perfectly fine. But I highly recommend moving these over to this side. Why is that? If I move x squared, if I subtract x squared from both sides, then I'm going to have negative x squared, making a negative 1. Given the choice, I prefer to keep the x squared on the right side because a will stay as positive 1. So I'm going to keep this one here. That's my motivation. I like that to be positive. And I'm going to subtract 13x, and I'm going to add 58. So subtracting 13x gives me negative 15x, and adding 58 gives me plus 50. Okay. Now I've got it in this position, and I can identify my A, my B, and my C. Here A equals 1, right? B again is negative 15, and C is 50. So putting those all in to the formula, negative 15, plus or minus negative 15 with parentheses squared, minus 4 times A times C, big square root over all that, divided by 2 times 1. Really the same feel as that previous example when your B is negative. All right, being really careful about those two parts. Okay, now a couple things, we can do that negative, those cancel, 2 times 1, no problem. Let's also compute what's inside that square root. What is inside that square root? Do the whole thing. And if you need to pause and do this, it's really helpful when you're doing it yourself. If we were in class, that'd be a lot easier for me to gauge where people are at and put it out there. Anybody got this one? I know you're writing these things at the same time. Okay, when you compute all of that under the root, you get 25. So my next line will be this. Did my negative. All that's 25, 2 times 1. Hey, this is really great because the square root of 25 is simply 5. There's no I or anything else. So x equals 15 plus or minus 5 all over 2. And now, because I can go further, I'm going to write the two separate statements. X equals 15 plus 5 over 2, and x equals 15 minus 5 over 2. And these will give me my two final answers. Well, 20 over 2 is 10. 10 over 2 is 5. So there I have it. Two pretty clean answers in the end. 5 and 10. And there we have it. Okay, so what was the big difference in this problem? All that at the beginning, right? We really had to be thoughtful, clean that up, and even my suggestion, putting everything on the right side to keep our x squared positive. I recommend doing that. There you go. If you want to check your final answers, of course, you could take that 10 and that 5 and one at a time, plug them into all of the x's here in the original. See if they work out to be true. Great thing to do on a test. That is the end of 9.3. I'll see you in 9.4.